All right. Well, our first speaker today is Cinnamon Crow. Now, usually we publish books, and we've been thinking about going over into cards. We have a lot of people submitting card decks for us to do, but we hadn't really found anything that we thought would go because it would be a departure. And Cinnamon is the first one that we've decided to do her card deck. And it's the Teen Oracle. And it's cards for teenagers. And she's going to be talking about it, but you said it's not just for teenagers. It can be for anybody. And it's a fun deck. So Cinnamon Crow is going to be talking about that, and you have some other things you're going to talk about too, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay, so it's Cinnamon Crow. Okay.
Good morning. I am really happy to be here this morning. I'd like to thank Dolores for inviting me here to speak with you. And I have to tell you, I have been a nervous wreck all week about coming up here. This is my first time to speak. And, I actually had a dream last night that when I got up here, I was wearing 2 different shoes. And I was really upset about that until I looked out at all of y'all, and y'all were all naked. And I thought maybe I'd shown up to the wrong conference. I woke up, I got up here and Dolores was introducing me and I looked out, y'all are all dressed, and I'm thinking, thank God that was not a prophetic dream. I'm going to talk to y'all this morning about the new kids. And I'm going to try and keep it brief so we can do some fun stuff afterwards, after the question and answer session. Let me tell you a little bit about myself first. I am a psychic and a Reiki Master. I'm also an Indigo child. I have several Indigo children and stepchildren. I have a 9-year-old crystal daughter and a 2-year-old rainbow son. So, as you can imagine, there is never a dull moment in our house. How many people here, by a show of hands, have ever heard of the Indigo, crystal, or rainbow children? Oh, good, good. Do we happen to have any indigo or crystals in the room? Oh, wonderful. See me afterwards, please. Well, I'm going to start with the indigo kids. Now, they are called indigo kids because of a dominant characteristic color in their aura, which is naturally indigo. They bring the indigo or third eye energy to the world to help raise the Earth's vibration during ascension. A major wave of these children began incarnating in the 1970s, although we had early scouts that arrived as early as the 1940s and 50s. They don't share any physical traits, but they do share some common personality traits. They are extremely psychic and very vocal children. They are often labeled as being rebellious because they question everything. They can clearly see the flaws in our ways of doing things and in our systems, and they wonder why these outdated systems are still in place. And when you tell them things like, well, this is just the way things are done, it doesn't resonate with these children at all. They're typically labeled as having ADD or ADHD, which explains the rise in ADD over the last 20 or 30 years, whereas before that wasn't even heard of. That's all due to the indigo kids. They have little patience for rules or discipline, authority, especially authority without question or authority without a choice. If you explain now to an indigo child why you want something done, they'll usually do it. But if you just tell them, just do it because I said so, forget it. It's like talking to a brick wall. Excuse me. Now, a lot of these children, unless they're in a position to be homeschooled or can attend one of these alternative schools that are just now starting to pop up, parents of these children are going to be receiving lots of telephone calls and notes home from their teachers, and we're experiencing a lot of that in our household, by the way. They tend to either be overachievers at school or very lazy. Now, I personally was an overachiever. I had straight A's in school. I would do my homework while the teacher's lecturing so that I could spend the rest of the class time either sleeping or writing short stories or, what I wanted to do. My children tend to run towards the lazy side. And they're not lazy because they're unintelligent. They're lazy because they find that the stuff that it's taught at school just to be useless and pointless. Now, subjects like math and language and science, these are useful classes to take, but there's so much more that our children need to be learning. There's nothing taught in the public school systems about spiritual well-being or spirituality. This is left to the parents to teach these children, and unfortunately, so many parents have no clue. They are so out of tune with their own spirituality that they have nothing to give these children. Let's take a look at what was taught 50 years ago. In the 1950s, 60 years ago, girls were taught how to be a good homemaker. Okay, and I'm going to read to you a small excerpt from a 1950s home economics book. There were 8 points that a girl was supposed to know in order to be a good homemaker, okay? Number 1, have dinner ready. Plan ahead even the night before to have a delicious meal on time. Number 2, take 15 minutes to rest so you will be refreshed when he arrives. Touch up your makeup. Put a ribbon in your hair. Be fresh looking. Be a little gay and a little more interesting. His boring day may need a lift. Number 3, clear away the clutter. One last trip to the main part of the house just before your husband arrives to gather up books and toys, paper, etc. Then run a dust cloth over your table. Your husband will feel he has reached a haven of rest and order, and it will give you a lift too. Now, I'm sorry, but dusting has never given me a lift. Maybe it's just me. Number 4, prepare the children. Take a few minutes to wash their hands and faces and change their clothes. They're little treasures, and he would like to see them playing the part. Number 5, minimize all noise. At the time of his arrival, eliminate noise of all washer, dryer, and vacuum. Some don'ts. Don't greet him with problems or complaints. Don't complain if he's late for dinner. Count this as minor compared to what he might have gone through throughout the day. And we're almost through here. Number 6, make him comfortable. Have him lean back in a comfortable chair or suggest that he lie down in the bedroom. Arrange his pillow and take off his shoes. Speak in a low, soothing voice and allow him to relax and unwind. Number 7, listen to him. You may have dozens of things to tell him, but the moment of his arrival is not the time. Let him talk first. And number 8, make the evening his. Don't complain if he doesn't take you out to dinner. Instead, try to understand his world of strain and pressure. He needs to be at home to relax. And this was the goal, and this was the clincher for me. Try to make your home a place of peace and order where your husband can renew himself in mind and body. Now, I was watching some of the faces of the women as I was reading this, and they had some of the identical expressions, which is like, please, not in my house. And we can laugh and have a little fun with this, and we can shake our heads at what they used to teach, and thankfully, we have evolved to the point to where this is no longer the norm. But is our current system really any better? Do we teach our children how to have a place of rest and order for themselves? No, we don't. And I'm sure 60 years from now, they will look back at some of the things we're teaching our kids and shake their heads at us. But this current, you hear on the news all the time about the educational crisis, and this is the Indigos at work. This educational crisis is caused by the Indigos to evoke change. So that's part of their mission. The Indigos are here to change. They're here to accelerate the evolution of our planet by shaking up and tearing down the world's systems and replacing them with new and higher ways. Now, not just better ways, but higher vibrating ways. They are here to specifically change the world as we know it. They are here to free us from our limitations and to show us the way forward. Now, an example of a famous Indigo scout is President Barack Obama. His entire campaign platform was based on change. Now, whether you agree with him or not, whether you voted for him or not, whether you agree with his plan of change or not, really doesn't matter. What matters is that he is doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing, which is bringing change to the table and making Americans question our ways of doing things. That is the Indigo mission at its heart, right there. Other early scouts came to update the world's technology. They're the inventors of cell phone technology and the internet. Gone are the days where you have to sit at home and wait on a phone call. Now you take your phone with you. Why wait for a letter in the mail when you can send an email instantly? Even with laptops and iPads, your home computer is even becoming outdated. The Indigos are also here to help raise psychic awareness. Now think of just in the past decade of all the shows that just on television alone that have been on psychic phenomenon. You have Psychic Kids and Ghost Hunters and Psychic Detectives, and you've had silly shows like Charmed and The Ghost Whisperer. All of these things weren't the normal shows 10 years ago. So what, when I was growing up, was really kind of taboo is now fascinating and even normal. Again, that's the Indigos at work. Now, society has labeled the Indigos, unknowingly labeled the Indigos, Generation X. Generation X are the Indigos, and they're thought to have no ethical or moral ideals and no motivation. And that's not true. They came to rebel against the ethics, morals, and ambitions of the previous generations. They will eventually tear down the economic, social, and educational systems, really all the systems in America and worldwide. Even astrology is being affected. I don't know if some of y'all saw the news program several months ago about the new zodiac. There was a lot of debate all over the internet about this new zodiac, and what I have found is some people fit within the new signs. There's 13 signs according to the new zodiac instead of 12, and some people fit perfectly within the new zodiac while others fit perfectly in the old zodiac. And if you look, the people that fit within the new zodiac are the Indigo, Crystal, and Rainbow kids, whereas the people that are not one of these new children fit within the old system. So let's talk a little bit about the Crystal kids. Now, a major wave of these children began showing in the 1990s, and like the Indigos, there were early scouts. The Crystals have a clear, kind of a crystalline type or a soft pastel colors. Now, where the Indigos brought the third eye energy, the Crystals bring the crown chakra energy. And that is seen as a violet or clear white energy. Now, the Crystal kids embody the Christ consciousness and the Christ energy. They share the same energy with ascended masters like Buddha, Muhammad, and Christ, and they have a similar message as Christ, which is peace, love, oneness, and forgiveness. They have a very calm and nurturing temperament. They're the exact opposite of the Indigos in this, and they're easier to spot than the Indigos. Crystal kids you can spot by their eyes. They have really large, penetrating eyes, and especially in babies and toddlers, you can spot them real easy because they have this old soul energy. And when they look at you, it's like this little old person looking at you through this little bitty body. And it looks as if they're looking into you or reading you instead of looking at you. So they're a little easier to spot. And because of this old soul energy, they're thought to be very serious children, and they're labeled as very serious children, but they're really not. They are the most fun-loving, enthusiastic children once you get past that old soul look in their eyes. They have a natural lie detector, the Crystal kids. They know when you're lying to them. And they're very distrustful of strangers. But once they get to know you, they're very affectionate. My 9-year-old daughter loves to give spontaneous hugs, just out of the blue. She's always been this way. Out of the blue, come up and give me a big hug and say, "Oh, I love you, Mom." Whereas my Indigo son, I'm lucky to get him to say 2 words to me half the time. Crystal kids are more comfortable with animals than with people. Now, my daughter would rather be outside in our backyard playing with our dogs than in the cul-de-sac playing with the other children. And she will go out and play with the other children, but only for short amounts of time. She would prefer to be with adults, like Crystal kids, and they will be with other children if the children have a matching vibration. Otherwise, small increments is all they can do with other children. They're natural healers. They love crystals and other healing tools. They're natural caretakers, very nurturing temperaments. They're also very telepathic. They are the pioneers of telepathy, which will one day be our sole means of communication on this planet. And because they're telepathic, many of these crystal kids don't begin to speak until they're 3 or 4 years old. And so they're labeled as autistic, and which partly explains the rise in autism now. And these children are not autistic at all. My crystal daughter didn't begin to speak until she was 3, and she didn't put sentences together until she was 4. And even at age 9, she's still undergoing speech therapy, which is very common with crystal kids. But we've always known what she wanted. It was never an issue that she couldn't talk. So the main purpose for the crystal kids is to open the path for telepathy, to remind us of our inner divinity, and to help connect us with our original sacred source. Now, the newest children to arrive are the rainbow children. And these are the hardest children to raise, but they are the most fascinating, in my opinion. The rainbow children, their aura naturally has all the colors of the rainbow in it, and they work strongly from the heart chakra, and they bring the full spectrum of the chakras to the world. They tend to incarnate either to crystal or indigo parents, but only to homes where there is no dysfunction. Rainbow kids don't have karmic issues to overcome, so they don't need to incarnate into dysfunctional homes to overcome any kind of limitations. Now, there's not a lot of information on the rainbow kids because most of them are under 5 years old at this time. And one of the leading metaphysicians had said originally that this is the first incarnation for rainbow children. And then there was another theory that's going around that these are ascended masters being reincarnated. Now, I don't know if my 2-year-old rainbow son is an ascended master or not, but I do know that this is not his first incarnation. He has had several. His spirit came to me, and I actually worked with his spirit before he was ever my son, before I even met my husband. So I know that he has been incarnated before I had recognized him in the form of his last incarnation when he came to me. So this is not his first incarnation. They are here, the rainbow kids, they embody the traits of both the indigo and the crystal kids. So they are very strong-willed and high energy like the indigos, but they're very nurturing, telepathic, and natural healers like the crystal kids. But they expect instant manifestation of their desires, which is why these are called demanding children. And let me tell you, that is very true. My 2-year-old is very demanding, and more so than your average 2-year-old. They clearly remember life on the other side. So on the other side, if you think of a thing, you have it in that same moment. So when my son thinks juice, he expects it right now. And when it's not produced right now, he throws a fit. When he was they don't understand the processes of life. That's part of the problem with the rainbow kids. They don't understand that there's a process to things here on earth. So when he was a newborn, 6 weeks old or so, he didn't want to cooperate when it came to feeding times and changing times. He wanted to go from full, from hungry to full without the process of being fed, from a wet diaper to a dry diaper without the process of changing him. And so at about 6 weeks old, anyone that's had children know you get very little sleep when they're that young. And I'd had a few rough days with him. So I told him one day, I said, Trenton, if you can figure out how to get from a wet diaper to a dry diaper without me changing you, be my guest. Well, after about 8 hours of no wet diaper, I started to panic because I didn't know if he was skipping the process or if he was dehydrated. So I said, okay, honey, I need you to not do that because I don't know what's going on with you. And, within about 20 minutes or so, there was a wet diaper, and that was the end of that. But he still didn't get that, and still it too, he doesn't get the process. If we go through a drive-thru and he hears me order French fries, he expects them right now. And I have to say, well, there's a car in front of us, and we're next. Not good enough. You said French fries. Where are they? So instant manifestation is the message and the mission of the Rainbow Kids. They are here to bring back the magic of the past, as magic will one day be the new science. They will teach us to manifest all of our desires instantly if we're willing and open to what they have to teach. Just try to keep a rainbow kid from something that they want. They are the most determined children. In my house, if you open up the refrigerator to get something out, my son likes to grab the condiments in the door and take off running. Now, if you open the door and keep him behind you to where he can't get into the refrigerator, you'll shut the door and he'll be holding a bottle of ketchup, and he'll grin and run off with it. He has manifested this bottle of ketchup in his hands. He's also very telepathic. And at 2, he's just now starting to say a few words. And even before he was talking, everyone in the house knew what he wanted. And I don't think anyone ever stopped to think about how they knew what he wanted. But everyone, all the other children, all of the family and friends that came over, everyone knew what he wanted. He can be asleep in his room, and I can be outside in the backyard, and I'll get a whiff of dirty diaper and say, oh, it's time for a diaper change. And he'll be asleep, and sure enough, it's time for a diaper change. One of the craziest things that he does is he can disappear. He can teleport. Now, at first, I thought that I was just, I always look for the logical explanation before I go to any of the spiritual. And I thought, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just, I'd see him run to the front of the house and then turn around, and he's right behind me. I'm thinking, okay, it's got to be me. And it continually kept happening to where I thought maybe I was losing it. So I started talking to my husband, and we were comparing notes, and he goes, oh, he does the same thing to me. My husband will be standing at the top of the driveway. The baby will run between the cars and around the truck, and he'll call him back. He doesn't want him running in the street. And he'll say, Trenton, come here. And you don't see him. And then you'll hear, Dad, Dad, and he'll turn around, and he's back up by the house in the front of the garage. And so we were like, well, is he disappearing? Is he teleporting? What is he doing? Well, I found one website that said that rainbow kids can bend time, disappear and bend time. Now, I don't believe everything I read on the internet, especially on the internet. And this was the only website that ever mentioned this. Now, had I read this a few years ago, I would have been like, yeah, right. But I have witnessed this. He does this stuff all the time. My husband looked at me one day and said, if he's doing this at 2, what is he going to be doing at 12 or at 22? I said, well, I don't know, but, I hope we're prepared. Anyway, that is the strangest thing that he does to date. Now, today, over 95% of the children that are being born are one of these new children. They're either indigo, crystal, or rainbow, or some variation of the 3. Now, the indigos will evolve and take on crystal traits. The crystals will evolve and take on rainbow traits. One day, all that's going to be left, this generation will die out, and all that will be left will be these new kids. And what's the world going to look like then? Where instant manifestation is the norm, where telepathy is our only form of communication, lies will be unheard of then, because everyone knows your thoughts, everyone knows your intentions, and everyone's living in that place of peace and oneness. That'll be an exciting time. Now, due to these new kids, psychic awareness and spirituality are on the rise among teens. The old religions, the religions of their parents, don't resonate for these children. They find that hard to swallow because it doesn't line up with what they see and know and just feel to be true in their own spirit. So they're exploring on their own. And with love and encouragement, these children can reach their full psychic potential. But without our help, some of these children will lose their way. A good example is the rise of gangs and violence, suicide and drugs among teens. It shows that a lot of these children have lost their hope. They feel stuck in a world that they don't comprehend with gifts they don't know how to use. If you ask an indigo child why they're here, they will tell you that they're here for a higher purpose. They just don't know what it is. And if they could just figure out what it is, they'd be okay. So indigos tend to suffer from depression. And most of this depression is really linked to the general meaningless they feel if they're not connected to their higher purpose or their spirituality. So what can we do to help these children? I mean, they feel stuck in a world they don't understand, suffocated, and we're not helping them one bit. You know, instead of gladly turning over the reins to this new and higher generation, we're trying to conform them to the molds of the past. And the result of this is rebellion in the form of violence and drugs, instead of in the way that they were meant to rebel, which was the avenue of change. Now, I actually was brought up in a family that had a fear-based religion. And my way of rebelling was through drugs for a lot of years. And although there was a lot of dark depression and a lot of heartache associated with that, it actually got me in touch in the end, when I found my way back, with my own spirituality, with who I really am. And it placed me in a position to help other indigo and crystal kids with this same issue. So actually, I'm very grateful for that. And even these children that are in gangs and violence and drugs and all of this other stuff, they still are, without their knowing it, fulfilling their purpose because they're causing an awareness of the problem. I mean, for decades, since the 1980s, we've had the war on drugs. We've had the war on gangs. But that's the wrong approach. Anytime that we are anti-anything, all we're doing is drawing attention to the problem. We're just feeding the problem. We can't be anti-anything. The vibration of the problem is different than the vibration of the solution. So let's think about what some solutions for this is, for this problem is. Now, all of us must interact with at least one of these new children. With 95% of the children being born, you have to know or at least be one of these children. So we start with the children in our own homes, and we work our way outward. Now, where I live, I'm from Houston, Texas, and two of the metaphysical bookstores out there offer psychic kid classes and indigo kid classes. One of them even offers a class for the parents and the children, where the children go into one room and they learn to develop their psychic skills, and the parents go in another as a support group and offering ideas on how to deal with these children and how to help and support them in a world that really isn't real ready to give into these new kids. You can provide tools for your children. Now, there are lots of wonderful books and tools. There's books on the law of attraction. There's, for teens, there are books on meditation and books on how to meet your spirit guides. And for my kids, now I told you I had the lazy type children in school. My kids have the attention span of gnats. They are not going to read these long books. They're just not. So what I do is I sit down on Monday nights with them, and I allow them to ask me any kind of questions they have and answer them, if I can, to the best of my ability. And I allow them to share their experiences with me. If you ask any child to tell you about their paranormal experiences, oh, they can talk for hours. Children are so open, they all have stuff to share. They just don't think anyone will believe them. So if you sit down and let them talk, you'd be amazed at some of the stuff that these children already know at such a young age without any kind of studying. We have practiced telepathy in my house. And I've taken 3 of the children just to see what their learning style is, their receiving style is. And I would send them, say, the color blue. One child would hear me say the word blue. Another would see the color blue in her mind, and the youngest would just know it was blue. And she didn't know how she knew. It was just that inner knowing. And so by figuring out what their receiving style of communication is, it helps me better teach them in the way that's easiest for them to learn. I've also taught my children how to get in touch with their higher selves and their spirit guides through crystals, pendulums, spirit boards. We tried all manner of things in our house, and I'm also a oracle card reader. And so my stepdaughter would always ask me to read her cards. So I'd get out one of my, easy decks, an angel deck or a fairy deck or something. And I'd start to read her cards, and I'd lay out a few to begin a spread. And oracle cards will have a word on the top, like intuition or law of attraction. And she would ask me, well, what does intuition mean? And what is the law of attraction? So I would spend more time explaining these basic concepts than I did in ever. Matter of fact, I've never read her cards for her because every time I pull them out, I'm explaining something else to her. So I thought that I would get online and I would find a basic beginner deck or a deck for teens that would, explain some of these basic fundamental psychic principles. And I would just buy her that and short explanations in the book, and then she could learn a little bit, and then we could learn how to do the cards. And when I got online to find her something, there was nothing out there. Absolutely nothing out there. There wasn't even a beginner deck for adults out there. So I wrote my own. I wrote it and sent it in to Ozark Mountain, and within 2 months after sending it in, I got a reply that they were interested in it. And now it's called Teen Oracle, but don't let that name fool you. This is a wonderful beginner deck, not just for a beginner oracle card reader, but someone brand new in metaphysics. This is a good deck. If you take out the references to ask your parents' permission and your teachers, it's wonderful for adults. I've had a lot of adults use this deck and say that they just love it. It covers a lot of basic, fundamental psychic principles, spiritual laws. There's some basic meditations in the book, like how to meet your spirit guides, how to shield, how to get grounded. It talks about the law of attraction. It talks about the mirror principle, things like intuition, what a real apology means, and the spiritual effects of gossip. Things that kids deal with, but really as adults, some things that we could all definitely learn about. It has very, very simple card spreads in the box. Now, I didn't include like the Celtic cross or anything complicated, just something very simple that the kids can use. And the very first time they use this deck, they can give themselves their own readings. It's so simple. So part of what we're going to do is after the question and answer session, if y'all would like to come next door, we're going to have some decks out and some of the card spreads, and y'all can come and do your own readings with them and try them out. And of course, I'll be over there to help if anyone really needs any help. But it's so simple that a child can do it, so I'm sure all of y'all can handle it. But it'll be fun. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask?
Okay, I figured you'd have some questions what you was talking about the children. One thing I want to tell you, Cinnamon, is I found, because I've written about these things also, is a few months ago, I was really amazed. It was on Good Morning America. They had some scientists on there and doctors. They made a startling statement that I've now included in my lectures. They have said they have found 100 million children have been misdiagnosed for ADHD.
Absolutely.
100 million children, and put on Ritalin and these drugs, and there's not anything wrong with them at all. They said they should have had a clue whenever the increase in this occurred in only 20 years. That's not possible. But now they're beginning to look at it, and then they said there's nothing wrong with these kids. They're bored, and that's what I've been saying for years. They're bored because everything comes so easy for them. And, they say, well, I've been on panels with, they call the special children. I spoke at those conferences, and the kids on the panels will say, well, I know this stuff. And they get bored with it. And they said, why does the teacher have to keep repeating it and repeating it over again? I got it the first time.
Absolutely.
And he said the teacher will ask them for an answer to a question, like a math question, and they'll give them the answer. And the teacher says, how did you find that answer? I know it. That's not good enough for the teacher. They want them to explain it. So the kid gets frustrated. So it's just being bored, and then they act out because they want more. The other kids are taking too long to catch up with them. So in my work, I was told to give these kids challenges, something different to do. Even if, and they're in a class with a lot of kids, if you could even give them something to tear apart and put together. Imagine the little kid, you're giving them something to do. And if you give them a special project in school outside of what the other kids are doing, is to keep them challenged and their mind going. And that's what I've been saying when I go to those kind of conferences. So it's amazing now they're admitting 100 million kids, and I don't know if that's just the United States or if that's all over the world or what. That's a huge amount that have been misdiagnosed and put on these drugs. They definitely don't need the drugs. So we are moving into a whole new thing here. And if you're interested, we have published a book on the new children by a different author. And she was at our conference a few years ago, Nikki Patillo. And the book is called Children of the Stars, I think it is. It's out here, and we call it the care and feeding of the special children. So you can understand them, and so they can understand themselves. And it's the same things you've been saying. So it's all happening right now. Everybody knows this is it's a reality. These kids are different. We call them the future of the world, the gift to the world. Okay, go ahead. Is that one on? It's supposed to be on. Okay. Try it now, you said. She's got one there, she said.
I had a question about indigo children. I have a teenage boy that I've suspected for a long time just because of a lot of his characteristics. He has ADHD. He was diagnosed very early. What has been interesting to me about him, though, is he has been very resistant to any of my introductions of metaphysical concepts, especially as he's gotten older. Oh, Mom's talking about that weird stuff again, and, is almost acts like he's embarrassed about it, doesn't want to hear it. Very critical of Christianity and some of the typical religions, and has recently decided he's an atheist. I mean, just came right out with that. And, my way of dealing with that is like, oh, well, that's an interesting way to think about it. Why do you, and just kind of question him about it and tell me why you feel that way. And, but I'm just curious, that part doesn't seem to fit if they seem to be more in touch with their spirituality. And I've tried to do the job of introducing him to different thoughts because I was raised around very fundamentalist Nazarene upbringing and kind of left that and have been on that spiritual journey ever since. And we haven't raised him in a church, but he just seems real resistant to introducing any of that. And now this latest thing of him deciding he's an atheist and he goes to an Episcopal school, which is interesting, but they're pretty open, thank goodness, to all different concepts. They even teach different religions, in that school. But I feel myself, even though I'm pretty open, saying, now don't go announcing that you think you're an atheist at that school, that goes against everything I believe to say that, but he's just so strong about it. He just feels so strongly about that. And so what are your thoughts on that?
He's just rebelling. He's just rebelling. And he will come into his own in time. Sometimes just the label is enough to rebel. A lot of these kids don't want any kind of a label. Don't call me an indigo child. Don't call me this. Don't call me that. I'm me. And so eventually, he will come into his own. And that intuition and that inner knowing and all of that stuff is still there, whether he wants to label it as, metaphysical anything. It's still within him. It is stronger within him than, and it's strong within all children, don't get me wrong, but it's strong in him anyway. And he will come into his own.
Is there anything I could be doing differently in introducing him to it?
No, just let him be. Okay. Let him be an atheist. You want to be an atheist? Go right ahead. Support him in it. Because when he gets your support, then he doesn't have to rebel against it anymore.
And that's pretty much what I've been doing, not making a big deal of it, just going, oh, okay.
And especially if he's going to any kind of a Christian-based school, what a perfect way to rebel. To say, I'm an atheist. I had to go to a Lutheran school for a lot of years. We were raised Southern Baptist, and I went to a Lutheran school, which is kind of backwards. But and that was a great way to rebel against everything. Well, I don't believe in any of this stuff anyway. So let him be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we got a mic that works there. Okay.
Hi.
Okay, is that right? Okay. I was really kind of resonated with when you were describing the crystal children, but I was like born in the 70s, and so it kind of threw me off because I'm like, whoa, I had never thought that,
There were way showers, early scouts from, the Indigos back in the 40s and 50s. So the major wave of crystals came in the 1990s. There were scouts way before that. You could very well be a crystal child.
Okay,
Very
well, so
well.
it threw me off, and it made me start thinking about, whoa, kind of rethinking what I'm doing here in my life. So if you could explain the crystal child just a little bit more, that might help me.
Well, the crystal children embody the Christ consciousness or the Christ energy. Okay, so they are here to not only pave the way for telepathy, but also to connect us to our inner divinity. That Christ consciousness that is within us all, and to reconnect us to our original sacred source. So getting reconnected with the source and spreading that message of love, forgiveness, oneness, that is the mission of the Crystal Kids.
Okay, thanks.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Wonderful.
Okay,
Great.
Cinnamon, do you want to stand back up there so they can see you better?
Sure.
Okay.
Although I was kind of comfortable down there.
It's hard to see you sitting down. Okay.
Okay, then I'll sit down.
All right.
Okay.
Anyway, I have 3 daughters, and I think they all fit within the time parameters of what you're referring to. And my youngest daughter, 13, on the 25th of February, was flying from Bali to Perth, Australia, and had successfully photographed out the port window of the airplane 8 photographs of incoming UFOs. And with the explanation of them, they were coming in out of nothing, appearing, and then rotating and dispersing right over the jet airplane itself. She recorded all this. My second oldest daughter, when she was 3 years old, followed with her finger a UFO flying right over our heads and said, "Mommy, Mommy, pesawat." And it was pesawat is Indonesian for jet aircraft. But when my wife looked, she saw a disc-shaped flying object quietly streaming through our overhead into the clouds. I missed it because I'm watching the ruts in the road in the car so I wouldn't give us a rough ride. And my third daughter behind me, She has a lot more experience, isn't that? Regarding UFOs. My question to you is, how would you know, I guess, except through your observations and readings, will you be able to tell in a remote way? My other two children could not make this, but my oldest daughter is, where they stand insofar as the rainbow or the indigo type children, all born in the time frame.
Well, the one behind you is definitely an indigo.
That's one.
Yeah, and the other two, I'm feeling one's an indigo, and the youngest is a crystal rainbow. You know, kind of embodies both. Now, it's interesting that you mentioned the UFO thing. Our 2-year-old son would run screaming through the house like he just saw, you know, something terrifying, and he could never tell us what it was until he saw the movie E.T., and he can say E.T., and now he'll come in there and say, E.T., E.T., and he's pointing at aliens that I can't see, and I can see spirits, but I can't see these aliens. And he's constantly seeing these aliens, and I just tell him, well, tell him to get out, you know, because he can say get out, because I don't know what else to tell him, or while they're here, but he seems to be attracted, you know, they seem to be attracted to these children, so I really will have to research that and find the connection between that, because we're just
Well,
discovering
Cinnamon, it's
that.
more than that. This is my new book is about.
Here
In
we
my
go.
lecture tomorrow night, I'm going to focus a lot on that.
Okay,
So
wonderful.
it's much deeper than you think it is.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's not negative at all.
Okay,
It's not. Nothing to be afraid of.
great.
So I'll be covering it tomorrow night. And that's why I came out with this new book, because there are so many questions
Yeah.
about it.
Well, there we go.
And just one other thing, 4 nights ago when my daughter Amy arrived from Utah, we stood out for 2 hours and watched orbs on the horizon turning on and off, obviously UFOs, out of Boonville. And I thought, well, how appropriate we come together from so far for this particular meeting and yet be, you know, already seeing something this phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Cinnamon, you were worried about not having enough time. We may have enough time to just do a couple here.
Okay.
Okay, I don't think we'll have enough time for 4 unless the questions are very short.
I just have a statement.
Ma'am,
It's nothing too serious.
ma'am, you can talk to her at her table when we go back to the table. Okay, because now we're running out
I
of
kind of
time.
want to just, I didn't know
Okay,
if
go
there's any
ahead.
educators out here, but yes, I am an Indigo child. As soon as I could speak, I always knew how to read from as long as I could remember. I knew my letters, my numbers, no problem, never had to learn any of that, just remembered. And as soon as I could, I'd pick up books and read them. And when I went to school, they did wonderful things with me because I was bored. And starting in kindergarten, I would go half day, several grades to 4th grade and half, and it worked tremendously. And then I moved to another school district, and on the first day of school, my teacher came up because my parents had told them I was in this kind of program, and she said, "You're no different than anybody else. We're not going to treat you any different," and that's that. And it just shut me down totally. And after that, I got really just bored and rebelled, missed a lot of school, you know, just went down a whole different pathway than, you know, I was in the beginning. I felt like I was on, you know, I had my power and I was doing great, and then just it
Suffocated.
changed. Yeah, so educators have a huge, huge deal with how children are.
Well, and as an adult indigo, you know, get in there and
Yeah.
and help make those changes.
Yeah, it's true. So great.
Hi.
Hi. I have 2 children. One I believe is probably a crystal child, and one I'm quite certain is a rainbow child. And I was diagnosed with ADHD, so I may or may not be an indigo. But I was wondering, is there any literature or books or anything that you can suggest to help guide these rainbow or crystal children?
There are books on, there's lots of books on the indigo kids. Doreen Virtue, and I can't remember the name at the moment, has a really small, thin book on crystal kids. And there is nothing as far as book goes on the Rainbow Kids. So maybe I'll have to write one.
Yeah, I know, Doreen.
Maybe next year.
How do you learn about them? Or where can you learn about them?
Well, there's a lot of information available on the internet, but I would look for sources that kind of say the same thing. And really asking your own guides, asking your children's guides.
Okay.
You know,
But we have the book here called Children of the Stars.
Okay.
And it's a small book, but it has everything you want to know about all of these different type of children.